North Carolina and South Carolina are two states within the same region of the United States, have similar values and culture, and even share the same name. But one of the Carolinas, North Carolina, has about twice as many people living in it. So if both states are so similar, then why has North Carolina become the dominant Carolina? And it all starts with their similar, but still very different geography. North Carolina and South Carolina share a name, border, and deep historic connection. Yet their physical geographies present key differences that have shaped their development into today. Both states are divided into three primary regions: the coastal plain, the Piedmont, and the Appalachian Mountains. But the extent and characteristics of these regions differ significantly. To start, North Carolina's coastal plain is broader, extending inland for a considerable distance, while South Carolina's coastal plain is more compact. North Carolina's Outer Banks region forms a distinctive chain of barrier islands that stretch along the Atlantic, creating a complex system of inlets, sounds, and shifting sand dunes. These islands provide a natural buffer against storms, but are otherwise very challenging to navigate and build on. South Carolina's coastline, by contrast, lacks an extensive barrier island system, but features a series of sea islands and an intricate network of salt marshes, making it more accessible and fostering major port cities like Charleston. The Grand Strand, a long, uninterrupted stretch of sandy beach, is a defining feature of South Carolina's coastal region, and well worth a visit. If you're just looking at the coastal areas, you might come away assuming that South Carolina has a better geography for development. And you'd be right, but let's keep moving east. Moving inland, the Piedmont region in both states consists of rolling hills and plateaus, but this is where things shift dramatically in North Carolina's favor. North Carolina's Piedmont region is broader and has more fertile soil and water. And because North Carolina couldn't develop its coastal areas, it has had far more development concentrated on it in the form of settlements. In contrast, South Carolina's Piedmont is narrower and transitions more quickly into the coastal plain. While both states have experienced economic shifts from agriculture to industry and services, North Carolina's larger Piedmont has played a more dominant role in this transition through the development of large cities like Charlotte and Raleigh. Finally, in the far west of both states, the Appalachian Mountain regions provide one of the most striking contrasts between the two states. North Carolina is home to the highest peaks east of the Mississippi River, including Mount Mitchell, the tallest point in the eastern United States. The Blue Ridge and Great Smoky Mountains define the western landscape, featuring a rugged terrain of deep valleys, winding rivers, and dense forests. This mountainous region creates a cooler, wetter climate and supports significant biodiversity, making it a destination for outdoor recreation and conservation efforts. South Carolina's portion of the Blue Ridge Mountains is much smaller, with Sassafras Mountain as its highest peak. However, the mountains have a much smaller geographic influence on South Carolina compared to their prominence in North Carolina. Another key difference between the two states lies in their rivers and drainage patterns. North Carolina's longer coastline and higher mountain elevations contribute to more extensive river systems. Major rivers, such as Cape Fear, Neuse, and Roanoke, flow towards the Atlantic, shaping the state's agricultural and economic history. South Carolina's rivers, including the Petey, Santee, and Savannah, also play vital roles, but the state's smaller size and topographic differences result in shorter river courses and less water overall. Finally, the climate variations between the two states further emphasize their geographic differences. Both states experience a humid subtropical climate, but North Carolina's geography allows for more diversity. The coastal plain experiences mild winters and hot, humid summers, while the mountains see colder temperatures and even occasional snowfall. South Carolina, with its smaller mountain region and more compact geography, generally maintains a warmer climate throughout the year. Its lower elevation also contributes to a longer growing season, which historically supported extensive agricultural production, particularly in cotton and rice cultivation. There are a lot of similarities between these two states, but the differences are pronounced. North Carolina has more of what matters when it comes to creating large settlements, primarily natural resources, fertile land, and ample fresh water. And we've seen that play out over the last couple centuries. Are you tired of figuring out what's for dinner tonight, especially on those busy weekdays? Well, now's your chance to have a home-cooked meal with HelloFresh's 15-minute meals, each of which are done in 3 simple steps so you can eat better this year without all of the hassle. So I've been traveling straight for about 3 months now, and I really miss my weekly HelloFresh dinners. Getting fresh and delicious ingredients delivered directly to me helped to ensure that I was eating well while also not breaking the bank by going out to eat. It was delicious, nutritious, and very easy. And right now, you can get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at hellofresh.com/geography10fm. One item per box with an active subscription. Free meals applied as a discount on your first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan. That's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to hellofresh.com/geography10fm, America's #1 meal kit. Did you know that North Carolina and South Carolina were once the same colony? It might seem incomprehensible to North and South Carolinians today, but the two states' history began as a single, combined region. The area that would become the Carolinas was first settled by Europeans in the late 1500s with a disastrous effort to colonize Roanoke Island that infamously led to the mysterious abandonment of the settlement. Not to be deterred, however, another permanent settlement began in the 1600s when King Charles II granted all of the land of North and South Carolina to a group of 8 English noblemen, known as the Lords Proprietors, in 1663. The new colony of Carolina was meant to be a profitable venture, but from the outset, its northern and southern regions developed distinct identities. Northern Carolina was characterized by smaller, self-sufficient farms with a growing population of European settlers seeking land and autonomy. The lack of deepwater ports hindered large-scale trade, which meant that the colony did not become as reliant on plantation agriculture. Instead, tobacco and livestock farming became the economic backbone, leading to a more decentralized and independent-oriented population. It's at this point that North Carolina, then just Northern Carolina, was the relative backwater compared to South Carolina, then just Southern Carolina. The lack of a major urban center in the early years contributed to slower economic development, but it also fostered a culture of self-reliance and gradual expansion into the Piedmont and Appalachian Mountain region. Southern Carolina, on the other hand, had a vastly different trajectory. With the establishment of Charlestown, modern-day Charleston, in 1670, the colony quickly became a major hub of trade and commerce. Its natural harbor and easy access to transatlantic shipping allowed it to develop a plantation economy based on cash crops such as rice and indigo. The demand for labor in these plantations led to a heavy reliance on enslaved Africans, making South Carolina one of the most slave-dependent colonies in British North America. But this also meant that it became one of the wealthiest colonies in North America. The wealth generated by these plantations concentrated in Charleston and created a more aristocratic society compared to the rural and dispersed settlements of Northern Carolina. This would eventually culminate in an official and permanent split between the two colonies. The first thing to understand about the Carolina split is that it was not caused by a single event, but rather a slow-growing rift that eventually led to two distinct colonies. One key catalyst was the Tuscarora War of 1711, in which British colonial settlers in the north clashed with the indigenous Tuscarora people. The conflict was exacerbated by the fractured governance of the Carolina colony, ruled by 8 Lords Proprietors who frequently undermined each other's treaties and policies. While the Tuscarora were ultimately defeated, the war deepened tensions between the northern and southern parts of the colony, with northern settlers bearing the brunt of the conflict, while those in the south largely distanced themselves from it and refused to pay for it. Even before the split, North and South Carolina functioned as distinct regions within Carolina. Charlestown served as the colonial capital, but the northern region had its own major settlements, like Albemarle and Cape Fear, and operated with a separate governor. Growing wealth in the South, ineffective rule by the Lords Proprietors, and persistent regional tensions led the British Crown to intervene in 1719, reclaiming South Carolina as a royal colony in order to maintain its wealth, while leaving North Carolina under proprietary control. This officially marked the separation of the two Carolinas. It's at this point that South Carolina seemed to have everything going for it: wealth, royalty, and a burgeoning aristocracy. So how did a struggling northern backwater colony surpass its southern economic powerhouse? Today, North Carolina is the dominant Carolina with over 11 million people compared to South Carolina's 5.4 million, which is quite the turn of events when, at the time of its split, South Carolina seemed to have all of the wealth and economy. So what happened? As it turns out, one of the most fundamental reasons for this difference lies in the geography of the two states. North Carolina's varied landscape, with a large and economically productive Piedmont region, has today allowed for the development of multiple major cities and a vast array of different industries. Recall that South Carolina in the 1700s and 1800s was heavily focused on a plantation and slave-based economy, where North Carolina had a more scattered agricultural economy. That's not to say North Carolina didn't have plantations or enslaved people, but it was significantly less than South Carolina. This meant that when the time came, North Carolina more readily pivoted towards the new global wealth generation, industrialization. The development of textiles, furniture, and later technology and finance positioned North Carolina as a leader in economic growth. South Carolina, still steeped in the wealth being generated by their vast plantations and slave-based economy, didn't see the need to do the same, at least not to the same degree. From this industrialization, North Carolina would eventually spawn the now famous Research Triangle, consisting of the cities of Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. These cities became a magnet for highly educated professionals and manufacturing in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and eventually technology companies in the late 1900s and into today. At the same time, and because North Carolina was rapidly industrializing, there became a need for banks to lend more money to manufacturing companies popping up all over the region. This is when Charlotte began to emerge as one of the largest banking hubs in the United States. Home to Bank of America, one of the largest banks in the entire world. This inevitably drew additional businesses and workers from across the country as North Carolina became a source of capital with which they could grow. South Carolina, however, didn't industrialize as rapidly or as aggressively, mostly because in the 1800s, it didn't have to. Its plantation money was still flowing far and wide. This also meant that it created fewer large urban centers at the time. After all, most land was devoted to plantations, and plantations required fewer people overall to work them. The eventual collapse of the plantation economy after the Civil War had long-lasting effects on South Carolina. Being so dependent on plantations for wealth, the state struggled to transition into a diversified economy when that wealth suddenly disappeared. This ultimately delayed industrial growth and urbanization, limiting its appeal for both domestic and international migration. Today, Columbia, Charleston, and Greenville serve as the primary economic hubs for the state. But on a national scale, they're relatively small and insignificant. The state's flatter terrain and historically agrarian economy led to less urbanization, making it less attractive for large-scale migration and development. Modern migration patterns have continued to contribute to the population gap between the two states. In 1880, the two states were relatively close in population. North Carolina was larger with 1.4 million people, but South Carolina was close by with 1 million people. But as the 1900s came, North Carolina has consistently attracted domestic and international migrants due to its strong job market and major urban centers. Its universities and research institutions have drawn students and professionals who often remain in the state after graduation. This all came to a head beginning around 1920 when, in the run-up to and during the Great Depression, South Carolina's population growth stalled significantly, while North Carolina's surged ahead. At the end of the day, the more industrial and urban North Carolina had more jobs to offer people fleeing more agrarian states. By 1950, North Carolina was home to more than 4 million people, while South Carolina was stuck at just a bit more than 2 million, the population ratio we continue to see today. Today, North Carolina is home to over 11 million people, roughly twice that of South Carolina's 5.4 million. And within North Carolina, the state would be led by the Charlotte metro region with 2.8 million people, about 500,000 of which are in South Carolina, followed by Raleigh with 1.5 million, Greensboro with 800,000, Winston with 700,000, Durham with 600,000, and Wilmington with 470,000 people. Meanwhile, South Carolina has much smaller metro areas, with the largest being Greenville with 975,000, followed by Columbia with 860,000, and Charleston with 850,000 people. Modern economic trends continue to reinforce this population difference. North Carolina's diversified economy, anchored by finance, technology, healthcare, and education, ensures steady growth and urban expansion. South Carolina, though making progress in manufacturing and attracting businesses to Charleston and Greenville, still lacks a comparable economic engine to drive large-scale migration and development. Additionally, North Carolina's investment in transportation infrastructure, such as major highways and international airports, has made it a more attractive destination for businesses and residents alike. North Carolina is the dominant Carolina today, but South Carolina has been one of the fastest growing states in the country for a while now. If nothing else, both Carolinas have become a very attractive place to live. Hey, this week I'm traveling all around Dalat, Vietnam, the Vietnamese city that was built by and still feels very French. So come join me and learn all about France's involvement in Vietnam. I hope you enjoyed learning all about North and South Carolina, and why one is about twice as large as the other. If you did, be sure to check out this video all about why Indiana is the runt of the Great Lakes states. Thanks for watching. See you next time.